When LIV Golf launched, it promised to break the traditional structure of professional sports with nine-figure contracts, team franchises, and a schedule built on financial security. After the sudden cancellation of LIV's planned season finale, silence from leadership has reportedly left players demanding answers, and Bryson DeChambeau is at the center of the storm, pushing for an emergency players-only meeting behind closed doors. Inside a private room in Dallas, the atmosphere was no longer one of celebration. Without an official press release, without a public announcement from management, and without warning to the fans, LIV's marquee season finale was quietly pulled from its slated location. Behind the scenes, executive leadership went radio silent. No emails, no official memos to player agents, no roadmap for how the season's climax would actually unfold. For weeks, players whispered in practice rounds. The team captains demanded answers from executives only to receive vague assurances and delayed calls. But when official channels failed, the league's most dominant individual voice decided he had heard enough. Bryson DeChambeau did not request permission from executive management. He did not wait for a corporate memo. He called an emergency players-only meeting, locking out executives, PR handlers, and league representatives. His message was simple. The league leadership isn't giving us answers, so we need to demand them together. Before we go deeper into what happened behind the scenes, tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, the UK, Australia, or somewhere else around the world? And what do you think? Did LIV Golf make the right decision by staying silent, or should the players have been given answers immediately? Drop your location and opinion in the comments. If you enjoy breaking down the biggest stories in professional golf, make sure to subscribe because this story is only getting more complicated. What was meant to be a minor scheduling adjustment has officially mutated into LIV Golf's first full-blown internal revolt. When players left the PGA Tour, they didn't just leave for upfront cash. They traded the tradition of the PGA Tour for a promised, sleek 14-event league calendar where every event was guaranteed, hyped, and funded by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. So when whispers began circulating that LIV's planned international finale was facing massive logistical and financial hurdles, the reaction was immediate. Venues hadn't been finalized, broadcast rights were in limbo, local permits hadn't been secured, and instead of addressing these operational failures directly, league leadership did the one thing guaranteed to frustrate elite athletes. They went completely silent. For over 3 weeks, players were left guessing where they would be flying, where their teams would compete, and how individual and team bonuses would be finalized. In professional golf, scheduling dictates everything from training blocks and physical recovery to travel logistics for entire support teams. When tournament directors couldn't provide basic answers to caddies and player managers, the frustration spilled over. Players realized that while their contracts were guaranteed, the operational structure of the league itself was showing severe cracks. The silence from the top wasn't seen as a temporary delay. It was interpreted by the locker room as incompetence. Players who turned down legacy titles on the PGA Tour suddenly found themselves in a league that couldn't even confirm the date or venue of its own championship event. The narrative that LIV was a polished, hyper-professional alternative to traditional golf began to crumble from within, setting the stage for an unprecedented confrontation. In any crisis, a vacuum of leadership is always filled by the person willing to take the microphone. In LIV Golf, that person isn't Brooks Koepka, who has largely kept his head down and focused on the majors. It isn't Phil Mickelson, whose early promotional influence has faded into the background. It is Bryson DeChambeau. DeChambeau's standing in golf has shifted radically over the last 2 years. By winning the U.S. Open and mastering YouTube content creation, he became the primary bridge between traditional golf fans and LIV's alternative format. He is currently LIV's most valuable competitive asset and its biggest ratings driver. When DeChambeau summoned every team captain and player to the Dallas meeting, he did so from a position of absolute leverage. He didn't just ask about the venue for the finale. He brought a listed agenda focusing on operational transparency, team valuation realities, and broadcast exposure. Several international players hesitated. DeChambeau made it clear that guaranteed money was no longer enough to protect the league's credibility. "We gave up our legacy spots for a product that was supposed to compete globally," was the overarching sentiment expressed during the session. DeChambeau argued that if the executive team couldn't execute basic event management, the players needed to form an organized council to force direct negotiations with the public investment fund itself, bypassing middle management altogether. This wasn't just a captain voicing frustration over a schedule change. This was LIV's top marquee star taking direct control of the locker room, establishing himself as the unofficial union leader of a league that was specifically designed to prevent player unions. Inside that emergency meeting, however, DeChambeau didn't find a unified room. He found a league deeply split along generational and financial lines. On one side are the megastars, DeChambeau, Jon Rahm, and Cameron Smith. These are players in their prime who still care intensely about world golf ranking points, major championship exemptions, and global relevance. For them, playing in front of sparse crowds at unannounced venues damages their long-term brand value. They can afford to demand structural changes because their career trajectories extend far beyond LIV Golf. On the other side are the veteran players and lower-tier team members who signed multi-million-dollar deals to secure their financial futures before retirement. For this group, rocking the boat carries real risk. They aren't interested in public battles with Saudi leadership. They want to fulfill their contractual obligations, collect their earnings, and avoid conflict. During the Dallas meeting, these internal tensions surfaced rapidly. When DeChambeau pushed for a collective statement demanding immediate answers regarding the finale, several international players hesitated. The fear of breach of contract penalties from the league's legal team hung heavily in the air. This division highlights LIV's core structural flaw. The league bought player talent with upfront capital, but it failed to build a shared cultural culture. When things run smoothly, guaranteed paychecks mask those differences. But the moment an operational failure like a canceled finale occurs, the divide between players fighting for competitive relevance and players fighting for financial security becomes impossible to hide. And that divide could become LIV's biggest problem yet. A league can survive an uncertain venue or a delayed announcement. What becomes far more dangerous is when the players themselves stop believing they are working toward the same future. Some want LIV to become a legitimate global competitor with stronger broadcasts, bigger crowds, and greater recognition. Others simply want the league to honor its financial commitments and avoid unnecessary conflict. That difference in priorities could make collective action almost impossible. So what do you think? Should LIV players stand together and demand answers, or should they stay out of management decisions? Let us know in the comments. And if you're following this developing golf story, subscribe for more updates and investigations. To truly understand why the canceled finale and DeChambeau's meeting matter, you have to step back and look at the global landscape of golf. The chaos inside LIV isn't happening in a vacuum. It is happening against the backdrop of stalled framework negotiations with the PGA Tour. When the initial agreement between the PGA Tour and the Saudi Public Investment Fund was announced, many players assumed a unified global schedule was months away. They believed LIV events would serve as a temporary bridge to an elite, unified global tour where everyone played together again. Instead, negotiations have stalled in regulatory red tape, player director pushback on the PGA Tour board, and massive valuation disagreements. PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan and the Tour's billionaire private equity backers have built a war chest, proving they can survive without immediate Saudi integration. This leaves LIV Golf in a precarious position. The Public Investment Fund is evaluating its return on investment. Millions of dollars have been spent on broadcast production, player guarantees, and event logistics, yet television ratings remain low and primary sponsors remain hesitant to attach their logos to LIV franchises. The silence surrounding LIV's canceled finale is directly tied to this financial reality. PIF executives are scrutinizing event budgets and questioning whether throwing tens of millions at a late-season finale makes financial sense without guaranteed broadcast reach. DeChambeau and the players realize that if LIV becomes a secondary priority for the Saudi fund during PGA Tour negotiations, their leverage disappears. The emergency meeting wasn't just about one event. It was about forcing PIF leadership to clarify whether LIV Golf is a long-term enterprise or a negotiating chip that is slowly losing its value. LIV Golf reached a critical turning point in that room in Dallas. The honeymoon phase of endless capital, lavish launch parties, and untouchable contracts is officially over. The reality of professional sports administration has set in. By commanding this emergency meeting, Bryson DeChambeau sent a sharp message not only to LIV management but to the entire golf world. The players will not remain passive passengers on a sinking promotional ship. If the league wants to retain its biggest stars, it must deliver basic operational competence, transparent scheduling, and a legitimate competitive platform. If LIV leadership responds to this player revolt with silence or legal retaliation, they risk alienating the few stars keeping their product culturally relevant. If DeChambeau and Jon Rahm lose faith in the league's long-term vision, LIV could transform almost overnight from a disruptive force in professional golf into a high-priced exhibition tour, struggling to justify its enormous investment. The PGA Tour is watching these developments closely. Every day, LIV spends fighting internal fires, dealing with venue uncertainty, and managing growing player frustration. Is another day the PGA Tour gains leverage in the battle over professional golf's future. What started with questions surrounding one finale could now force LIV executives to confront a much larger problem. Can a league built on guaranteed money maintain player loyalty when confidence in its leadership begins to disappear? And Bryson DeChambeau's decision to bring players together may have changed the balance of power inside the league. For the first time, the players are showing that guaranteed contracts do not necessarily mean guaranteed loyalty. If they believe their careers, reputations, and competitive futures are being put at risk, they have every reason to demand a seat at the table. So now the biggest question isn't simply whether LIV can save its canceled finale. It's whether the league can restore the confidence of the players who made its entire experiment possible. What do you think happens next? Should Bryson DeChambeau and the other LIV players continue pushing management for answers, or should they stay out of the league's internal decisions? Drop your prediction in the comments. And if you want to stay updated on the biggest developments shaking professional golf, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.